You know, it's a pure gut instinct, get out of here.
Right. But in fact, you've left that as a possible thing to mine later
absolutely,
on,
yeah.
right?
I've left as a possible thing to mine later on, is he really dead? She doesn't, I mean, he's lying there bleeding on the floor.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
That's true. He might
So,
still, you
so
know.
he might show up to haunt her in future books, which would be kind of fun.
Yeah, he could be paralyzed. He
Yeah.
could be alive.
Yeah.
He could be dead.
So,
all kinds
so
of
I've
stuff.
left that open for the future, and also the fact that would they really have prosecuted her? You know, is this something that she really needs to flee?
Or was
But-
there actually like a face in the window of the cottage, you know,
Yeah.
the unknown child
Yeah.
witness or something that could get her off?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
that's nice to have done such an open-ended
yeah,
thing.
so she gets as far as Liverpool, which is where most of the Irish went when they left Ireland.
Why so? Because of the ferry?
Oh, there's the ferry, and it's a huge Irish community. It's a community you can blend into. Well,
Oh,
she-
because of the docks and the navvies working on
yes,
the docks?
Yeah, so it was the first stopover point for any Irish people came to Liverpool to start with. And so this large Irish community. And she hopes that she can blend in there. And just by sheer luck, she meets a woman who, I don't want to give away too much of the plot because I hate that when you read
Well,
the
you're
book.
just setting
Yeah,
it up.
yeah,
I mean, I think
yeah,
you can do
yeah,
this part.
Yeah, she meets a woman who is bound for New York, but has found that she can't travel because of a medical condition. But she has 2 little children, and the husband is already in America and can't come back to Ireland because he has crossed the British and he's on the wanted list.
Okay.
So he can never come back to get the children. She can never take the children to him now. So
Right, because Ellis Island did have health standards.
yes,
didn't it?
yeah, you had to be given a clean bill of health, and she has now been diagnosed with TB, so there's no way they'll let her in ever. So she doesn't know what to do. She wants her children to go to their father before she dies, because she assumes with TB she will die. But she can't get them there, so this is a godsend. This is one of those coincidences that happens just occasionally in everybody's history. You know, she says to Molly, "Will you take my children for me?"
And travel then
And
under
travel
her...
under her name, yes. So she has the ticket under her name. And so Molly finds herself on a ship pretending to be the mother of 2 children going to Ellis Island.
How are the children with all this?
The children they're really so traumatized for being out of their own environment. They've come from Ireland to this big city, and you know, their mother is their one lifeline. And then their mother tells them that for some reason her own ticket isn't working properly, so she's going to have to go back and get her own ticket. So if they're very good with Miss Molly, they'll get as far as their daddy, and then she'll join them pretty soon. I mean, it's all lies that she's told them. Molly doesn't like this, but that's the way she's convinced them. So Molly's very good with children. She's raised 4 younger brothers on her own, and she knows how to handle little kids. So luckily, she's good with them. And the little girl, she becomes a lifeline for the little girl because she's so scared on the ship. The little boy makes his way around and makes friends on the ship, but the little girl clings to Molly all the time. So they get as far as Ellis Island. That's when Molly, coming under this assumed name, finds herself in a heap of trouble.
Right.
Because a man is murdered. And it seems that this Kathleen Connor, who is the name that Molly's traveled under, is someone who knew him in his hometown and maybe had a reason for wanting him dead.
Aha, so she's now trapped as a suspect and can't confess that she isn't.
Yeah, she can't
this
say, look,
person.
I'm not really this person, yes.
Because
so,
then she'd be deported, and if she went back, she'd have to face.
Yeah,
what an interesting quandary.
Well, I wanted to do, and I thought Ellis Island was a great place to write about. I've been wanting to write about Ellis Island for a long time, because it just has, you know, those walls are just so reeking with stories. And so when I started to think about this book, I read a whole lot of first-person accounts of people who had come into Ellis Island between sort of 1892 and 1920. Got a wonderful feel for the fact that it was a wonderful experience for some people. You know, for some people, this was everything they'd dreamed of. They'd come away from the worst possible situation, and they'd arrived on this place, and then ahead of them was freedom and a new life. For some people, this was a nightmare, especially in the early years, because it was so corrupt.
Right.
There were suggestions that you could bribe your way through. Some people found their baggage had been rifled and all their goodies had been taken. When you got to changing your money, if they thought that you didn't speak English and knew nothing about the American culture, they would exchange your entire life savings for a pile of shiny coins. So there are all these things, you know, for some people they thought they were so close to the promised land, and it turned into this nightmare. There was the medical examination. As you went up the flight of steps, you had examiners in white coats looking at you, and then they'd lean across and write something on your back. And you didn't know whether this was good or not. You know, was it good that I have something written on my back, or good that they've ignored me? What these were suggestions for a future medical examination. Maybe it was possible lameness, possible pregnancy, possible insanity, possible TB, and the one that comes up in this book. The little girl's eyes are red. And this could be that she has the disease trachoma. And if she had trachoma, she'd be sent straight back. And this was something that happened. Can you imagine a family, say, has 4 children? The youngest one is diagnosed with trachoma. What happens? Does the rest of the family stay there while the mother takes the little girl back? Do they all go back? And, you know, maybe they're going back to nothing. They have no home anymore. They've run away from a pogrom. They've run away from political persecution of some sort, and there is nowhere for them to go.
Or they've just sold up.
They've just sold up everything they have and have nothing left at all. So there were these awful decisions being made every day on Ellis Island, and I wanted to bring a feeling of some of those out into the book. So it's, you know, it's a place, also it's the ultimate locked room, really. Nobody can leave Ellis Island unless they're given permission to. So, you know, they know that the killer is on the island.
Right, which is a classic construction, you know, to have a closed circle of suspects. You've done that admirably.
Yeah.
What fun. And you've also left this position so that you can now write more books about Molly, right?
Yes, by the end of this book, she is in New York, and she thinks she might like to establish herself as some sort of private detective. She thinks it might be a good idea to be a people finder. There are all these people who've run away from their existence in Europe, and they've lost contact with their relatives. Their relatives are desperate to know about them. She thinks maybe she can put the two together. So in book 2, she's trying to apprentice herself to a private detective. And this is the last thing in the world that he wants, is to have this woman following him around. So this is how the book, you know, how the book gets going, this fact that maybe she could learn something from him.
And what is the title of book 2?
It's going to be called Death of Riley, because I want all of them to have Irish titles, you see, but with a little twist, you know, like, so instead of Life of Riley, it's unfortunately going to be Death of Riley. But and the funny thing about it was I wrote it last summer, and before September anyway. And the theme of the book has a lot to do with the anarchist movement in New York. Right,
which were the terrorists of their day.
Yeah, they were the terrorists of their day. There was a very lively anarchist movement in New York, and they were bent on destroying the status quo and of destroying heads of state. You know, the year before they'd assassinated the king of Italy, and thought that they were very wonderful for doing this. And I bring into the second book Emma Goldman, who was the mentor of a lot of these. I bring her into the second book. And she, at this stage, I read her autobiography, she's moving on a bit at this stage. She has been advocating violence, etc. And now she's thinking that maybe we're taking this one step too soon. Maybe before she's becoming an advocate for birth control, among other things.
Right.
If families can't control their own destiny, how can they control running a country? And so she's saying until women can take charge of their own bodies and can maybe be able to get out there and one day vote and all these things, you can't hand the country over to people.
So she was driven into suffragism. That
yes,
certainly seems clear.
Yeah.
Where was Margaret Sanger? Was she operating at this time? I've kind of lost track.
I think she's a little later than this. I think she's more around sort of 1910, as far as I can remember.
I can't recall.
Yeah.
Obviously, we are before family planning. Certainly before childbed fever, which was. I mean, it's hard for us to recall now how risky pregnancy was for anyone due to infection, if nothing else.
Yeah, and the fact that, you know, a man would have, say, 2 or 3 wives because one of his wives was going to die in pregnancy or childbirth, and that was quite normal. And also, if you have 10 children, if you're constantly bearing children, how can you have any interest at all in what's happening to the country?
I see. So she was in favor of improving the lot of women to make them more politically active.
She was saying, yes, let's free women from this constant childbearing. Then maybe they can have input into how a country's run.